Alright, so the past two chapters of My Hero Academia, the latest chapter and last week's chapter, I gotta say one thing before I get into the reviews, and I gotta be 100% honest with you guys. I am so glad we're getting into a new arc of My Hero Academia. It's really getting me excited, and I'm gonna tell you why. Not that I hated the last arc of Academia, but I definitely felt as though when you come from an arc that was absolutely stupendous, arguably one of the best arcs in My Hero Academia yet, the whole stuff with All for One, you come from that and then you go to an exam arc, it definitely doesn't have the same zest and the same type of appeal that the previous arc had. And don't get me wrong, I know you can't have hype every single arc or whatever, but that's what was going on with me as far as my experience with My Hero Academia with this latest arc. Especially, I picked, I guess, a kind of bad in a way time to jump into reviews because it was just an exam arc, and exam arcs aren't always the most exciting, especially when this was just to get their license and stuff like that. So that was my grievance with the latest arc. It wasn't that it was a bad arc, but again, when you come from high expectations of like arguably again one of the greatest arcs in Hero Academia yet, and you come to this, it's like it definitely feels like a little bit of a downslide. But it was a good setup nonetheless, because again, that arc had some relevance and some importance, because if you go back to arcs like the Stain arc, how they kind of got in trouble for basically fighting and, you know, taking down villains and stuff like that without having that license. Ultimately now, for at least majority of the characters, that won't be an issue anymore. They can go and fight the villains, and I think that's a huge setup for what's to come. Although we did find out a couple people didn't get their license, and that's very interesting. The two people that didn't get their license, it kind of makes me wonder what will be their role, what will happen with them in the future, because Todoroki and Bakugo, the two people that didn't get their license, you gotta look at it like, okay, these are the two people that people suspected will either become villains or vigilantes, because they kind of have that personality. So them not getting that provisional, even though it was hinted that they could get it in the future, which kind of reminds me, for Hunter x Hunter fans, it kind of reminds me when Killua didn't get it and then later on went and got his Hunter license, stuff like that. Kind of reminded me of something in that regard, as far as like, yeah, maybe one of them will get it, but I think probably or possibly at least one of them might not. Maybe that'll set them on the path of being a vigilante, because they were never 100% justified or inducted to be able to do things on a normal basis, as far as like, you know, within the realms of the law of having this license to be able to save people and, you know, fight the villains, which ultimately would, again, either Todoroki or Bakugo, depending on who goes down that path, would, you know, make it so that, yeah, them saving people or them doing anything is kind of illegal. But who knows, because for all we know, you know, My Hero Academia, since it is academia, it could be contained within the school realm, and it could not go any further than that. It could, you know, stop basically before we would have parts where like, hey, they're kind of adults now, or they're older, they passed the school shit. So that's kind of a argument right there. But the whole stuff with Inasa and his relationship with Todoroki, I think it helped Todoroki to realize a few things, and I think possibly it could have helped him to develop, but there's also the possibility as well that maybe it made him think other things, because it's going to expand Todoroki's mind again, everything that he did. To me, it looks like it's good, you know, character development, like, okay, you know, I fucked up before, I can't do that, things that I've done is my own fault, I can't blame, you know, oh, it's my dad or whatever. No, I was a dick for a while, for a long while I was an asshole. So I think that's going to expand his mind in that regard. But then at the same time, Todoroki could get to a point where some really fucked up shit happens, to the point where he says, fuck it all, I've done so much and I fucked up and stuff like that. So time will tell where his character molds, but it definitely seems as though he's molding towards being a better person, and overall that's a good thing, right? Bakugo thing I think is just funny, and I think Bakugo will definitely, like, between the two of them, I could see more so Bakugo at this particular point getting his license and being like, you know, just like an asshole, but a hero nonetheless. Todoroki's the one that I could potentially see in the future, depending on where his character goes, not getting the license and ultimately being a vigilante. But again, it could be either or. And the fact that Inasa apologized, but half-assed it and shit like that, it was kind of like, hey, you know, that was his roadblock, and I think that was ultimately just a purpose to set off Todoroki's character development once again. So I think that was Inasa's role. I definitely think he'll be back at some given point, and Shiketsu High will see more of them, but ultimately I think that was his main purpose in this arc, in this little exam. And it is weird though that aside from them two, which are the top tier, which I ain't gonna lie, I had some laughs where Mineta was like, hey, you know, I guess the hierarchy changed now, buddy. I'm like, really, Mineta? So you think because you managed to slide on by, that ultimately you, Mineta, the funny ass pervert, are higher up there now than Todoroki and Bakugo? Be real, bro. Just be real. Which leads me to my first question, I guess. What do you guys think? How do you feel that aside from the top tiers, which ultimately because of their personalities and not really their capabilities, aside from Bakugo because he's an asshole and Todoroki because Inasa was on his ball sack the entire exam, they didn't pass but everyone else did. Do you think that that was a desperate attempt by the association because they're in desperate need of heroes? That's why they let everybody get their license? Or are you still disappointed that everybody, including the weaklings from UA, passed? I mean, I'm kind of like 50-50 with it. I do think, yeah, everybody passed. It's like, seems as though UA, everyone's doing it together and stuff like that. And the technicality as to why these two major players, like, had it been that, you know, X, Y, and Z were too weak and that's why they couldn't do it, then it'd be a little more understandable. But the fact that the way Bakugo and Todoroki didn't pass is not that they weren't capable of it. It was just like, oh, well, one's an asshole and one had a distraction the entire time. So that's how I feel about it. I'm not angry about it. I'm not upset about it. But everyone in UA passing except those two. I would have liked for it to be maybe a little bit different, that, you know, let's just say Mineta again. And I hate to pick on Mineta because it's not that I don't like the character. I think he's funny as shit. But, like, you know, one of the weaker characters didn't pass simply because they weren't capable. But then one of the biggest reveals and what's making me excited about My Hero Academia again, like, to no, you know, extent, is necessarily the villains never really left. Because in this exam, we had a villain the entire time. And then it led to the end of the chapter where we see, okay, the villains are coming back in. Because for me, and I think for a lot of people as well, one of the things that drives My Hero Academia and gets it interesting again and exciting again is when you bring back the villains, you bring back the Shigarakis and all of them. It's like, okay, that's when I'm back in, I'm tuned in, like, I need my Academia fix 110%. So to find out that Toga was there this entire time, she was cosplaying, so to speak, using her ability to pretend she was that one chick from Shiketsu, ultimately that was really a nice twist, and it ultimately showcased that, oh, so that's why she was on Deku's balls, which showcases that Uraraka, you got nothing to worry about, don't worry. Deku's not building this big harem. That bitch was just a crazy villain chick that had a purpose. So you're good, baby girl, you're good. You're gonna get the D. Deku's gonna give you the almighty D. You're safe. But definitely leaves me with a bunch of questions as well, because one of her purposes for being there was she was trying to get DNA on Deku, so that's why she was playing it all up with everything that she did, fucking around with him, trying to find out more information. It wasn't that she gave a fuck about him. She's kind of weird and, you know, quirky or whatever, but she was trying to get the DNA. Now, if they know the power of All Might, if they know the power of One for All, and they're like, oh shit, so we can steal it from this little motherfucker, and we have All Might's power, that's going to be a problem, because especially if they have DNA, I'm kind of curious how can that pass on, because I kind of talked about this in a video a long time ago, I don't know which video, whatever, but essentially, let's just say back in the day, All Might, he was pounding a bitch, and I know I'm getting a little graphic here, but bear with me, I'm just trying to set a point, and he fucking just ejaculated inside of a bitch. Would that ultimately pass on the powers, or does he have to willingly give it? Because if that's the case, if he doesn't have to say, I'm passing these powers on, and it's just a swap of DNA, then ultimately Deku's fucked right there and Shigaraki got him by the balls. It's just a matter of how they're gonna do it. Or it could be that just having that DNA in general, they have science, they're villains, you know, ha ha ha, my mustache twirling skills are impeccable. Ultimately, he can clone people that have the same capabilities, he can implant it in people. Shigaraki could ultimately get that power by adding it on, using different techniques. There's so many possibilities of what he could do now that he has that DNA, and I love the fact that this entire time, we're looking at this exam, we're like, what's going on with this Shiketsu bitch? Why is she so fucking weird? Oh shit, we had a villain in our midst the entire time. So it makes me kind of want to reread this arc in retrospect, just to kind of examine her a little bit more and see why was she so fucking weird. Like, well, obviously because she's a villain, but when she was saying X, Y, and Z, what was she trying to accomplish there? When was it that she grabbed this DNA? A lot of questions, and I mean, ultimately, again, it makes it so that this arc was a lot more worthwhile, because what we got from this arc was as follows. We got, now they won't get in trouble whenever they get into a scrape with a villain or they need to save somebody. They don't got to worry about, oh, we're gonna get punished, we could get thrown out the school, because everybody except 2 people, and, you know, UA, not including Inasa, whatever, got their license, they're good to go. That's also gonna leave a crutch for them. Like, if Bakugo and Todoroki get involved and stuff like that, when a big villain shows up, they could get in big trouble. Also sets up a path that potentially one of them could become a villain or a vigilante, or maybe both. One will be a villain, one will be a vigilante. It could go the hunter exam route, where later on down the road, because it was confirmed that they can get their license again later on, maybe they could try and get it, one of them or both of them, something like that. We also got that everyone except those 2 in UA got the license, which is going to be arguably arguably controversial because some people are going to be pissed like it's on some fairy tale shit. They're going to feel like, oh, everybody's passing, everybody gets the win, you get a license, you get a license, everybody gets a license, including little Greg back there with the boogers on his nose. And we got, once again, the reintroduction of the villains, and we got that Shigaraki, a dangerous person that shouldn't get his hands on any type of All Might DNA, has that DNA. If Toga gives it to him, he can create an army of All Might, powered up motherfuckers. He can steal the power for himself. There are so many different things, so we have a huge setup there. And with all that being said, last chapter, kind of a bridging gap. Little surprise at the end with Todoroki and Bakugo not getting the license. Inasa, personally, I don't really give a shit because he's from Shiketsu High, and ultimately, again, I feel his goal was just to kind of add more character development to Todoroki. This chapter, the twist that we had a villain amongst us this entire time, as well as the ending with finding out that basically they have the DNA now from All Might or Deku, so they can get the power for one for all. That's making things interesting. So I'd say maybe last week, 6.5. This week, 7.5, possibly an 8, because that reveal is a game changer right there. Any overall thoughts of these past 2 chapters? Right now, I'm not gonna lie, I'm back really hyped for My Hero Academia, and I hope it's not a long stretch again until we see the villains like Shigaraki and stuff like that, because this could be some really exciting stuff. We're bringing the villains back into My Hero Academia. But thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you liked anything I had to say or enjoyed the video, drop me a like. I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you want more from me, make sure to subscribe, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and stalk my Facebook to get more when the video ends. I'm ForneverWorld, and as always, people, have an awesome day.